Good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining us for the Navigating Accessible Vehicle Purchase webinar. We'll get started in the next 2 minutes, giving folks a chance to log in. A copy of this webinar is being recorded, and the materials, including a transcript, will be placed on National Disability Institute's Accessible Transportation and Assistive Technology site, along with other webinar recordings that have taken place in the past. Good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining our webinar, Navigating Accessible Vehicle Purchase. Next slide. Real-time captioning is provided during this webinar. The captions can be found by clicking on the CC button in your Zoom controls at the bottom of your screen. Or you can use this external captioning link that is posted in the chat box. Next slide. If you have questions during today's webinar, we invite you to put those questions in the Q&A at the bottom of your screen, and our presenters will address those questions during today's session. If you are listening by phone and not logged into the webinar, you may also ask questions by emailing hprice, HPRICE, at ndi-inc.org. And that information is posted in chat too. So we want to thank you for joining us today. This presentation was funded by General Motors, and we thank them for their generous contributions to make this webinar and the handouts available and other resources that will be shared over the next couple months. So I am an employee of National Disability Institute, NDI, and NDI is a national nonprofit organization dedicated to building a better financial future for people who have a disability and their family members as well. NDI is the first organization committed exclusively to championing economic empowerment, financial education, asset development, and financial stability for all people who have a disability. And we've been providing financial education and resources for 20 years now. What we do, we help to build capacity in the field through training and technical assistance. We drive systems change by implementing models that can be replicated. We test innovative approaches to financial empowerment. We lead research to uncover barriers and opportunities for people and providers of services really geared towards individuals who have a disability, who are seeking financial empowerment and financial stability. We advance change through public education and policy development. Next slide. I'd like to introduce today's presenters, Theo Braddy, the Executive Director of National Council on Independent Living, Bryan Rogers from the Rochester Driver Rehabilitation Program, Drive On, Henry Powell, the Independent Living Specialist with Maine's Alternative Financing Program, Molly Jones, Director of E-Commerce and Direct Selling with Mobility Works, and myself, Lori Schaller from National Disability Institute. I am a manager of financial empowerment. And next slide. So today's agenda, Theo Braddy will provide opening remarks, and I will cover national accessible vehicle statistics, the process of navigating accessible vehicle purchase, grants available, Social Security Administration work supports, and protected savings options. So during our registration for this webinar, we asked, what are barriers that people experience when trying to purchase an accessible vehicle? So this presentation will really address those barriers, most of them being related to the cost of an accessible vehicle. So we'll share ways to reduce costs throughout our presentation and how to find the most appropriate assistive technology that will help an individual with private transportation. So Bryan Rogers will cover driver assessment and rehabilitation. Henry Powell will cover alternative financing programs and affordable credit. And Molly Jones will cover modified vehicle dealer services. Next slide. So I welcome Theo Braddy, the Executive Director of National Council on Independent Living, to share his thoughts. Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you very much, Lori. Appreciate that. Um, Good morning, everyone. A quick visual description. I'm a black man with a black shirt, red t-shirt, bald-headed, with a salt and pepper beard. More salt right now than pepper. So I'm excited to be here. So I definitely want to welcome everyone for joining us today. And thank the organizers, thank Lori and the rest of NDI for recognizing that this conversation is not just technical, but deeply personal. And obviously, the reason I'm here today is to talk about that, um, about purchasing an accessible vehicle. But before we get into all the things that you need to know, I want to take a few moments to explain why this matters so much and why so many people with disabilities owning a private modified vehicle is not just a luxury. A luxury. It's not at all. It's much more than a luxury. It's a necessity. It's needed. Transportation is more than just mobility. Transportation determines whether you can work, whether you can participate, and whether your life is truly your own. If transportation uh, is so unreliable, if your transportation, and I'm going to say this over and over again, if your transportation is so unreliable, everything built on top of it becomes unstable. Your job, your health care, your relationships, your ability to say yes or no, stay or go, All of that is affected. I learned long ago that my story is your story. I lived with a disability since I was 15 years old. And for many years, I relied on public accessible transportation, paratransit, and other shared ride systems that were supposed to provide accessible, affordable transportation. On paper, those systems work, they sound workable. But in real life, they're often not. Using public accessible transportation meant uh, scheduling rides days in advance, ride pickup windows instead of real time, long rides with multiple stops, missed connections, and constant uncertainty about whether a ride would actually arrive. If the vehicle was late, I was late. If it didn't show up, I didn't show up. And that wasn't an occasional inconvenience. It was a constant reality. And again, my story is your story. What people often underestimate is the snowballing effect, impact of unreliable transportation. It means being unable to attend college, turning down job opportunities, being unable to stay late at work, missing meetings or medical appointment. It means arriving exhausted before the day even began from the weight of all that you went through. Over time, unreliable transportation quietly limits what's possible. It just doesn't affect where you go. It affects how many people perceive your reliability and your ability, professional or your potential. And no one should have their ability judged based on whether a ride shows up. So let me be clear. Public accessible transportation plays an important role, no doubt about that, because it's the only option some people have. And I wish I could make it better. I've been trying for 40 years. But it is not often reliable or flexible enough to truly remove transportation barriers, especially for employment and full community participation. We can't build independence around a system where you don't control your schedule. You can't make last minute decisions. You can't stay late or leave early when life happens. And believe me, life happens. That's not independence. That's participation on someone else's terms. Purchasing my own accessible vehicle changed everything. For the first time, transportation stopped being the barrier that determined what I could or could not do. Finally, I could get to work on time, travel for my job, participate in leadership roles, accept opportunities without trying to negotiate logistics first. That vehicle didn't just provide transportation, it provided control, predictability, dignity, and it improved my quality of life. I could plan my life the same way non disabled people do it by deciding where I wanted to go and when. This is about equity, not extra. Accessible vehicle often talked about as though it was optional or excessive. It isn't, but we need to be honest. For many people with disability, an accessible vehicle is the difference between employment and unemployment, isolation and engagement, dependence or self-direction. We don't question the need for a car when someone else needs one to get to work. But for people with disabilities, it's different. It's different for some reason. A modified vehicle, simple, really, in the bottom line, it create an equal playing field. This is why this webinar matters, right? That's why today's conversation is so important and essential. This webinar is not just about buying a vehicle. It's about understanding. It's about respect. It's about, like I said, that equal playing field. It's about giving you options, your rights, available funding, and supports, and how to make a really informed decision. You're going to hear that today. Because when transportation barriers are removed, people don't just move more freely, they live more fully. I'm honored to help set the stage here today and grateful for the panelists. You got a bunch of great experts that you're going to be hearing from and give you really the practical side of this whole process. My hope is that everyone leaves here today with more clarity and more confidence because independent is an abstract, it's practical. And for many of us, it's the beginning of reliability, accessible transportation. So I want to pass it off to Lori and thank you for hearing what I had to say today.
Thank you, Theo Braddy. Thank you for setting the stage. This is great. Okay, next slide. So my name is Lori Schaller. I'm an employee of National Disability Institute, and I'm a manager of financial empowerment. Next slide. So what are the statistics for people who need an accessible vehicle? In 2017, the National Household Travel Survey indicated that 25.5 million people over age 5 report disabilities that limit their ability to travel. We need to address that. The Census Bureau projects that by 2030, right, as more people age or acquire a disability, there will be 21.5 million more wheelchair users among people 55 and older. A new wheelchair accessible vehicle starts at about $70,000. So we need help to be able to afford these vehicles. Next slide, please. So there are grants that may help. So if you have a specific disability, maybe a spinal injury, for example, you may want to reach out to United Spinal to see if they can provide a grant. The State Aging and Developmental Disability Council of your state may cover the cost of a modification of a vehicle. Many Medicaid waiver programs available across the United States will cover the cost of modification. If your goal is to complete education that leads to employment, or you need an accessible vehicle to work, vocational rehabilitation may cover that cost of a vehicle modification based upon the household income and your employment goal. U.S. Department of Veterans Affairs is very efficient in providing grants for vehicle modification for service members and veterans with service-related disabilities. And we posted their phone number here that you can give them a call to see if you're eligible. The National Mobility Equipment Dealers Association has a rebate program. And when an individual purchases a new vehicle or leases a new vehicle, they may be reimbursed up to $1,000 for those costs. And that can all help to reduce these expenses. So in today's session, like, what step do you want to pursue first? And maybe like day one, you want to start with, am I eligible for any grants? But then maybe start another activity at the same time, because for each individual situation, the timeline for help may be different. But a grant could take a while, and then in the meantime, you could have other activities completed to help you towards your goal to save money. Next slide. So Many people who receive like SSI and or SSDI because they have a disability are not aware that the Social Security Administration encourages people to work to their fullest ability. A person who has a disability and receives these benefits is eligible for Social Security Administration work supports that help the person to work, complete their education in some instances, retain their benefits at least for a period of time, including those health care benefits, Medicaid and or Medicare, earn more income and purchase resources that support their continued education and employment. Next slide. So, for youth who are under the age of 22 who receive SSI, this is one of my favorite work supports. It's called the Student Earned Income Exclusion. So, if that person wants to work and attend school regularly, a bunch of their employment income will not count up to $2,410 a month, or adding up each month's employment earnings up to $9,730 this calendar year will not count as income if that person communicates to Social Security Administration that they want to use this work support. And that helps them to keep their full SSI payment. And then they may want to deposit that extra employment earnings into an ABLE account, since they're ABLE account eligible, and they can use those saved funds towards purchasing a vehicle or an accessible vehicle to be able to get themselves to their job. That is considered a qualified disability expense. Next slide. So there are also other work supports for a person of any age who receives SSI or SSDI who wants to work. So there's the impairment related work support, or an IRWI, and that can help a person to afford any type of assistive technology, including vehicle modification. A person who maybe needs hand controls in their vehicle to be able to get themselves to their job, that mileage to their job and back again may reduce their countable earned income that could help that person to stay in pay for their SSDI benefit longer. Another one of my favorite work supports is the Plan for Achieving Self-Support, or the PASS plan. This may allow that person extra income to help them pay for the purchase of a vehicle or a modified vehicle to be able to get themselves back and forth to work. SSI and SSDI beneficiaries are eligible for free benefits counseling, and the link is provided here so you can find your local benefits advisor that could tell you what work supports maybe you've used that you didn't even know you had used, and what work supports you are eligible for in the future that can help you to work to your fullest ability and acquire resources that you need for employment. Next slide. So what is an ABLE account? So a person who has a disability that began before age 46 may be ABLE eligible. A person who has received SSI and or SSDI since before age 46 is categorically eligible. A person, though, who has not received a disability benefit, and we know many people have a disability and they never receive a disability benefit, or they receive their disability benefit after age 46, all they need to do is take a disability certification to their doctor, ask the doctor to write down what type of disability they have, and the fact that that disability began before age 46, and then they can open an ABLE account. An ABLE account can hold up to $100,000, and that is not a countable resource for a person who receives SSI benefits. A person who receives SSI benefits by working and utilizing work supports may eventually become eligible for SSDI, and then they can save in that ABLE plan up to the balance limit, and that's almost $600,000 for many of the ABLE accounts. A person is allowed one ABLE account to save and invest monies in. Next slide. So why save in that ABLE account? Because that countable resource is excluded for means-tested benefits, like even applying for financial aid, or when applying or receiving housing assistance through HUD. Any amount of ABLE savings is not a countable resource for SNAP, for SSDI, for any type of Medicare or Part Medicare, Medicaid benefits, including Medicaid waiver services or Medicare savings programs. Next slide. So what can ABLE funds be spent on sometime in the future? So they can be saved and invested for a period of time. And then when the person is ready to purchase, for example, assistive technology, those funds can be used for that purpose or to cover transportation costs. And the slide lists the other types of qualified disability expenses that the IRS defined as qualified disability expenses. Next slide. So once you've started maybe the process of seeing if you're eligible for any grant or funding that can help you to purchase a vehicle, you might want to reach out to your driver rehabilitation program to see if they can provide supports for you. So I would like to introduce Bryan Rogers from the Drive On program in Rochester, New York. Thank you, Bryan.
Hi, thanks, Lori. Um, so as Lori was saying, my job title is specifically I'm a certified driver rehabilitation specialist. I work for Rochester Rehabilitation, which is a nonprofit organization. Many people in my field will work at a hospital or type of clinic setting. But the key is basically, and what can be difficult is finding us for your driving needs. So I've been doing this for about 17 years. Like I said, I'm in the Rochester, New York area. And as I just touched on, it can be very difficult to find your local, if you even have a local, driver rehab specialist. Here in New York, we're one of the few places you can go to have these driver assessments. Um, we do every type of assessment someone could need, or almost every type. So the good news is here in Rochester, um, and with most places, we can work with all types of disabilities. Um, there's two main worlds of adaptive equipment. There are low tech and high tech. Not every place you go to will have both or all types of adaptive equipment, which can make things a little more difficult. Here, we're lucky at Rochester Rehab to have just about every type of adaptive equipment someone might need. No place probably has everything, but we're able to accommodate just about every type of disability. So we work with people that would have spinal cord injuries, TBIs, traumatic brain injuries, MS, CP, spina bifida, muscular dystrophy, strokes, any kind of medical condition at all. We're here to help. So, to kind of walk you through the process, how you would start is, of course, finding us, which I said is tricky. Lori mentioned there's a website. It's ADEBLE com, where they have a great tool there where you can just punch in where you live and it'll show you your closest certified driver rehab specialist. That's probably the best way to go, or to ask your local doctor, or if you're seeing physical therapists or occupational therapists, those types of people would hopefully have some idea of where you could go. So, to start the whole process, once you find us, the first step is when you come in, we're going to do what we call a clinical assessment. So, my job essentially is when I meet you to figure out what your needs are to get you to drive safe. Um, we would do a number of things depending on your disability. We like to customize each visit for everybody so that you feel you're getting that special attention you deserve, but also we're not wasting your time. Meaning, if you came in for a spinal cord injury and there's no cognitive issues, we would try not to waste your time with things like what are the colors of a stop sign or traffic rules. We're going to get right to the good stuff, as I like to say, and focus on what your needs will be to drive a car. So we would start if there's any vision problems. Vision is obviously very key. So we will always do a vision check. That might be something standard with everybody, just because sometimes you do find some surprises. Things like depth perception or peripheral vision might be more limited than someone thought. So always good to check vision, and if appropriate, braking reaction time. So some people may come in with they, let's say, have legs amputated or neuropathy. If they're not going to use your legs, we wouldn't do a braking reaction time, obviously. But there's other ways to assess that. So once we have you in to our clinic, like I said, we'll do the vision assessment, braking reaction if applicable, and then it's really getting into a physical assessment. So we would look at your strength, your range of motion, your basically sensitivity, things like that. To keep it simple, what is working well? What could you use to drive and what isn't? So, for example, we might have someone, let's say, with muscular dystrophy who has very limited range of motion and strength in one hand, but the other hand's a little better. So we'd focus on, okay, what can we do with the good hand? Can that not so good hand help in any way? Could that provide any help with driving? But the key is to basically figure out, what do you need to drive safe? Like I was saying, there's low tech equipment, there's high tech equipment. The high tech equipment would most likely be more for people with a high level spinal cord injury and muscular dystrophy. Um, Things like electronic gas and brake, and things like a special touch screen, which you could use for starting the car, shifting gears, many other functions. It's truly amazing the equipment they have out there to help people drive with really any kind of disability. So once we get you in, the first step, figure out what you need to drive. The next step is then to train you on that equipment, of course. So the first couple appointments, maybe figure out what equipment you need. Once we get that figured out, now we go driving around town with all the equipment, making sure you could do everything. Shifting gears, using your signals, beeping the horn, doing the wipers. All of the necessary things to be a safe and independent driver. Being fully independent might mean we also need a way to bring the wheelchair along with you. Some people will drive right from the wheelchair and do everything from the wheelchair, but some people will transfer into the driver's seat and need a way to take their wheelchair with them. So there's a few different options with that, which we could go over with you. There's ways to store the wheelchair in your vehicle if big enough, on top of the vehicle, if the wheelchair is a certain type, or there's a behind the vehicle lift, many different ways we could go over. So we've kind of figured out what do you need to drive. Let's train you and make sure you're using everything safely. Let's make sure you can get places independently, meaning you wouldn't need anyone to help you with your wheelchair or getting in and out of the vehicle. And once we've established all that, you're pretty much good to go. And now would come time for me to write that script, as we like to say, for your car. So I can kind of pretend like I'm a doctor for cars and write up the appropriate equipment modifications for your vehicle. Once I write up that script, I can send that to a vendor such as a Mobility Works that you'll be hearing from later. They are the place that would take the script, which has all the information and equipment you'll need, and they are the place that installs that equipment. So we work closely with those vendors to make sure everything goes right for you. If they have questions about the modification report, they can contact us and we can clear things up with them. Basically, we want to make sure that everything that you were using and trained on is properly installed in your vehicle. And then after that, you're pretty much ready to go. So kind of a little recap. You'd want to find your certified driver rehabilitation specialist. You can go to the ADED, ADED website to find that. We'll bring you in for that clinical assessment, figure out your needs for driving, then train you on that equipment, write the script for the vendor to install that equipment, and then you're off and driving. There's one step, depending on what state you live in, that I kind of forgot about. But once you've trained on the equipment, you will need to most likely change or modify your driver's license to reflect that equipment you're using. For example, in New York State, on our license, there's a little letter R, which stands for restrictions. And you might have, for example, if you're using hand controls to drive, it would be like the letter X. A spinner knob would be the letter Z, things like that. Basically, reporting to the DMV that you're using this new adaptive equipment, and now you're perfectly legal and you're off and driving. Just to touch on one couple things real quick, as far as the adaptive equipment, I do hear a lot of stories of people, they're desperate to drive and they want to get right back out there, and they'll go onto Amazon or an online type of website to purchase their own hand controls or their own steering device. Some things are really basic, like this steering device here, as you see. You could get that online very easily. I advise against that. You want to have even if it's something that simple, you want to have your adaptive equipment installed by a NMETA certified vendor, such as a Mobility Works that you'll hear from later. Because if anything were to go wrong with your equipment, you want to be able to show that it was installed by a place that's certified and it was recommended by a certified driver rehabilitation specialist. That way you're in the clear if any accident or anything bad should happen. I think that pretty much wraps it up. And again, feel free to put any questions in the chat. And if you wanted to reach out to me personally, you could go to rochesterrehab.org, and that's my website. And feel free to reach out with any questions. Thanks.
Bryan, if I could ask a question. So is the evaluation paid for by a funding source typically?
So,
And what is the referral process?
great question. The referral process, typically your PC or any doctor really that you're working with can refer you. that is preferred. I wouldn't say 100% of our people have gotten the doctor referral, but most people will or will get it at some point during the process to let the doctor know what's going on with your driving. Um, as far as the cost, that's always been tricky. There's not a lot of resources. As you mentioned, the best place for like New York State would be your vocational rehab. The one in New York is called Access VR. They are a wonderful source. Of course, the catch is as long as your driving is related to keeping or getting a job or or education, they would likely, it's not guaranteed, but they would likely pay for some, if not all, of your evaluation and training. But even more likely, they would pay for that adaptive equipment. Um, as I mentioned, there's like the high tech and low tech. The high tech equipment, when all said and done, can be in the $50,000 to $100,000 range for some of this equipment. Not to scare people, most equipment's not high tech. Most of it's within like a couple $1,000s. But regardless, that's still a lot of money either way. That's where a VR vocational rehab place would be very beneficial. If not, then it can be really tricky. There's little organizations you can look for grants. In New York, we have an organization called Endless Highway. Like they'll provide a $40,000 grant like once a year to someone who like wins that. You can apply for that. It's really tough to find, unfortunately. But your VRs are the most reliable, best place to go.
Thank you, Brian.
Sure.
Okay,
Thank you for
next
having me.
slide. Thank you. We'll have a Q&A opportunity too following today's presentation. So I'd like to introduce Henry Powell from Alpha One. He is an independent living specialist with the Maine Alternative Finance Program, and there are more than 40 of these types of programs available across the United States. Thank you, Henry.
Thanks, Lori. My name's Henry Powell. I work, like Lori said, at Alpha One. I wear a lot of hats there, but one of them is I help to run all our alternative financing program. Oh, I should say I use he, him pronouns, and for people with visual issues, I'm a male wearing glasses with short hair and a vest, and I have a blurred background. Most states have an alternative financing program. Each of those programs is different, and I would definitely recommend reaching out to your local program to see what the requirements are and what the process and even what they can provide for services before moving forward. As our state is different than most other states. After somebody's done an assessment, like Bryan would do, we then will hopefully assist them in getting some funding to help them to purchase a vehicle. Like Bryan and Lori had both mentioned, we often will see folks who are getting assistance from Voc Rehab or the Veterans Administration. And typically, though those programs will only cover called the conversion of the vehicle, so the thing to make that vehicle accessible. But the chassis of the vehicle, the actual structure, is not covered by those programs. So that's where we might come in, one of our alternative financing programs. We typically get a referral from them, and we would work together with them to get funding in place through a low interest rate loan in order to have that person purchase a vehicle. The other scenario is sometimes there's people looking for vehicles that are unable to work, or it's a vehicle for a child or for an older adult that you're trying to purchase it in order to get them out in the community, and so this program can be utilized for that as well. Um, our program does not require that the person who the vehicle is for be on a loan. So, a caregiver, a family member can purchase a vehicle for that person's benefit. Like I mentioned, all the alternative financing programs have different program rules and requirements. Ours has a 3.75% interest rate, and all of the programs offer a low interest rate and affordable credit building loan. There's often more flexibility in terms of your credit score or background credit history. Our credit score is 569 or higher, or if it's somebody who's never had a credit card in their life and has no credit history, we also will accept those people to apply for a program and can certainly approve them. Um, I definitely would recommend, like Lori said, go on that National Disability Institute website, check out that alternative financing program PDF. I think I counted 45 programs nationwide, and contact your local program. Like in Maine, we only service Maine, so you'd need to find your individual state and then contact them to check in. Many of them connect with the bank, and the bank does the actual lending of the funds. So you'd work through the program to get approved through a bank, and then the program would guarantee the loan. So if there's ever any future issue on your ability to repay, the program would assist with that piece. So that's kind of where that's tied in most of the time. You can move on to the next slide here. So like I mentioned before, NDI, actually, can you go back to the previous slide? How much can you afford? There we go. NDI has a lot of good resources. One of the things that's really helpful on their website is the spending plan, kind of getting into the details of the monthly payments and what kind of things you're spending money on in order to be able to afford a loan for a vehicle. As we can see in this slide, new vehicles or owning and operating a vehicle is super costly, and adapted vehicles are way more expensive. Like Lori mentioned, it's $70,000 for a new vehicle. We saw somebody come through our program, $120,000 for a new vehicle that they were purchasing, which thankfully most of that or half of that was covered by Voc Rehab, so they didn't have to pay that full amount, but it's expensive. And you think about a place, we live in Maine, winters, salt on the road, the vehicles are degrading quickly compared to other places in the state, in the country. So it can definitely range. And so it's helpful to know that repairs are also going to be required. And if it's a primary vehicle, you're going to use that vehicle a lot. So kind of trying to extend the life of that as much as possible. Our main recommendation for people is to check your credit score. That's always the number one requirement for any of these programs. The higher the score, you often will get a better interest rate and your loan will be less over the life of the loan. You can check your credit score for free from each of the individual credit bureaus once per year. You can have a full credit score sent to you. So that's super helpful to see, your history, if there's any collections, any of that information. We also recommend what's called a soft credit pull, which is from something like creditkarma.com, where you can log in and see what your credit score might be at that moment. It's much faster, but it doesn't give you really the full picture. So I certainly still recommend to everybody just pull one of those free credit reports every year. There's a phone number here for the National Federation of Consumer Credit Counseling as well, to just reach out to them and get some assistance. Sometimes credit scores can be complicated, and oftentimes people with disabilities have more complicated credit histories, as sometimes it takes a while for Social Security income to come into play. Sometimes a disability can happen quickly, and so somebody's not expecting it and they lose their income immediately, and then it's difficult to get that back. So we all know that credit can be challenging, and as a part of the alternative financing programs, we certainly understand that. So we work with you to try to maybe improve your credit, give you some credit counseling. In terms of our process, we will receive an application from somebody, we'll do a full credit check, and then we'll check in about what is required. For our program, there's quite a bit that we require as we try to give people credit for the beneficial things that they're doing. So we'll ask for 3 months of bank statements. There's statements for each of their credit cards or other loans, proof of income, proof of expenses. And then once we receive that, we'll be able to make a determination. Typically, it's pretty quick. Our program has a turnaround of a couple days. Sometimes programs require that a board vote as to whether or not somebody's approved. So that, that might slow it down slightly in that process. You can move on to the next slide here. So this is a lot of bullet points here that are detailing information from the NDI spending plan webinar, which is also super helpful to just kind of do a deep dive into your individual expenses, and has a lot of good information about what to think about as you're trying to apply for a loan for an adapted vehicle. Like Lori had mentioned, looking into grants through the Medicaid waiver or other grants to try to cover the conversion for the vehicle is very helpful in terms of reducing that amount that might be owed for a loan. Also thinking about what equipment might be cheaper. Like for instance, if you can transfer into a vehicle, maybe getting a fully adapted vehicle with a ramp isn't actually the best approach, but maybe instead getting a lift on the back of a vehicle, that would certainly reduce costs for the overall cost of a vehicle. Are there opportunities to reduce your monthly expenses? Is there an opportunity to increase monthly income? Are there other family members or anybody else that you might be able to add to a loan in order to assist with that monthly payment? What income pays for each bill is helpful information to think about. And then where can money be saved? And if you can put together a few months of saving money, then you can kind of determine whether or not you can afford a payment. Sometimes people come to us and can only afford a couple $100s a month, and that's really just going to be difficult to purchase an adapted vehicle with that amount of money. So we're typically seeing something like $700 a month for a payment at least. So that's certainly something to kind of strive for and see if there's ways that you can work together in order to purchase that. Able accounts are great for that. Other family members being on a loan, if that's possible through an alternative financing program, is also super helpful. So all of that info is something to bring to your alternative financing program so that they can then determine whether or not you'd be approved for a loan, and then moving forward through that process with them. Typically, they're very helpful if there's complicated credit, if there's not enough money left over at the end of the month. You could apply and then see what might be possible, and then you talk to them about what steps you may be able to take in order to come back to them in 3 months or 6 months and then be approved. So we really try to work with any of our applicants if they're not approved to see, hey, what can you maybe do in order to try to come back to us and then actually get that adapted vehicle that you might be looking for. So, like I said, always good to reach out to your local AFP, alternative financing program, and see if you can try to qualify through their programs and see what might be required, what their limits are in terms of amounts that they can lend out to you and the process and the timeline.
Great. Thank you so much, Henry. Next slide. So those alternative financing programs, you probably want to reach out to them too as soon as possible, because it can take a while to prepare yourself and to know what that particular program requests so that you can access a loan at an interest rate 0 to 8%, right? That could save you a lot of money. And then we welcome Molly Jones, the Director of E-commerce and Direct Selling with Mobility Works, and she will share her expertise. And just so you know, she trains a lot of the dealerships across the United States in how to meet your needs. Thank you, Molly.
Hi, thank you all. Appreciate being here and happy to discuss some accessible vehicles and those options. Can we go ahead and go to the next slide? Wonderful. And we'll go just one more, please. Thank you. So the purpose of me being here today is just to go over what is available for accessible vehicles, not only the vehicles themselves, but also some of the equipment that is available and how to get prepared to purchase an accessible vehicle, because it certainly can be overwhelming. Go ahead and go to the next slide, please. All right, wonderful. So makes and models available. This is just a brief overview of what's available. You may find some other makes and models available, but this is kind of the most common of what you'll find. So there's a variety available. We have Chrysler, Honda, Toyota, Chevrolet. And then there's also a variety of mobility van converters. So the big ones that you'll find out there are going to be Driverge, Ability, Vantage Mobility, also known as VMI, or all-terrain conversions, also known as ATC. Again, there's going to be more out there than just these, but these are the big ones that you'll find. All right, next slide. All right, so conversion offerings and accessible features. So I'm going to go over the different types of conversion. So power versus manual, side versus rear. We'll go to the next slide. Wonderful. So side entry versus rear entry. On the screen here are two photographs of vans, one with a white van with a ramp on the side, so that is going to be our side entry, and one of a silver van with a ramp in the rear, and that is going to be our rear entry. Next slide. Great. So our rear entry accessible vehicles, there is a photo here of a close-up of a woman in a wheelchair in a rear entry vehicle. So she's there in that channel. What our clients find as some of the pros for this type of conversion is that a larger parking space is not needed, meaning that a handicap accessible parking spot is not needed for this particular vehicle, which can be a benefit. Tends to be a little bit more budget friendly when compared to our side entry counterpart. It's also the simplest navigation for wheelchairs, so it's just straight up that ramp and straight back down, no turning or anything like that. So very easy for both manual and power wheelchair users. And it's best used by families or caregivers, frequently using tight or unpredictable parking spaces. Next slide. Next one we have here is the side entry accessible vehicle. So there are several photos of a white van with a ramp on the side. There is a gentleman shown in several different positions here. He is shown in his wheelchair in the second row position or center position where he is the passenger. He's also shown in the front passenger position, still seated in his wheelchair. So he's next to the driver. And then that third photograph or fourth photograph is of him in the driver's position in his wheelchair. So these side entry accessible vehicles, they have multiple interior layout options as demonstrated here by those photos. It gives access to the driver position or the front passenger seating area. And then there's also a ramp choice of a fold out or an in-floor. A fold out is just what it sounds like. That ramp is going to fold out for access and then up into the doorway. And then the in-floor is a ramp that slides in and out underneath the floor, and it does not impede the entryway. On these side entry vehicles, that trunk space is still usable and accessible. And this type of conversion is best used by our clients who want driving access or prefer to sit in that front passenger position. Next slide. So when it comes to accessible conversions, we do have two options. We have power option or a manual operation. Power is referring to a remote or buttons inside the vehicle to operate that conversion. And manual means that somebody is manually pulling out that ramp for access. So on that power operation, this is most commonly used by independent drivers. And it is, again, remote operation with several buttons inside the vehicle. This power option does give the ability or the option of a kneeling feature. So this is a feature that has that vehicle squat down just a little bit as the ramp operates. And what that does is it reduces the ramp angle. So this is fantastic for our manual wheelchair users or even our power wheelchair users. So that ramp angle is not nearly as steep and much easier to navigate. For the manual operation, this is most commonly used by families and caregivers. It's generally a lower cost when compared to the power option, and it's generally a lower maintenance option in general. We do recommend that our clients bring in their vehicles every 6 months for preventative maintenance, but in the long run, that manual operation tends to cost a little less to maintain. We'll go to the next slide. All right, so additional accessible equipment. So here we're going to go over some securement options as well as some driving aids. We'll go to the next slide. All right, so manual securement options. On this slide, I have two photographs. The first photograph is of a longer tie-down securement option. There's a black hook at one end and then a silver fitting at the other end. And the other photograph is much smaller. It has a silver fitting at one end and a black hook at the other. So the first securement option I'm going to go over is the standard manual securement. That's that first photograph I described with the longer strap with the black hook and the gold fitting. So this, what happens is these black hooks go on four sturdy parts of the wheelchair, and then the fitting goes into the track that's on the accessible vehicle itself, located on the floor. It does require some strength to use effectively. And then the retractable securement, it's going to be used the same exact way. You're going to place that hook on four sturdy parts of the wheelchair, and it's a lot easier to use than that previous described manual securement. Think of your seatbelt when you yank on it and it goes click, 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 click. That's exactly how this retractable tie down is going to be used. It's going to self-tighten. We can go to the next slide. So our third securement option is the automatic docking system. This is a great option, very easy to use. It does require in-store installation and fitting because it is custom to not only where you sit in the vehicle, but also to your wheelchair. And this device must be used when driving from a wheelchair, so something to consider. The lockdown will be installed. Pardon me. So there is a photo of the lockdown on this slide here. It is a gray box. So that lockdown will be installed on the floor of the vehicle in the desired position, either the driver, passenger, or center passenger. And then a bracket will be installed on the bottom of the wheelchair. So client will simply drive over this lockdown. It will grab that bracket and secure them in place. And then the seatbelt can be used in addition to this. It is required. And we'll go to the next slide. So as Bryan mentioned earlier, we do install hand controls and driving aids. You do need to work with a CDRS or a certified driving rehabilitation specialist to receive that prescription. But we do install hand controls. As you see in this photo here, there is a set of hand controls. And then we also install steering aids. On this photo as well is a tri-pin spinner knob. So those are two commonly prescribed driving aids. We also offer left foot accelerators and advanced electronic driving systems that Bryan mentioned earlier as well. And just to note, we do need to have that prescription on file or the restriction on the back of your license in order to install these types of driving aids. We can go to the next slide. So understanding your needs and available options. On these next couple slides, I'm going to go over some questions you'll want to have answered before you start looking for an accessible vehicle. This will help you narrow down the type of vehicle that you're looking for and just overall kind of shorten your search and make you a more knowledgeable purchaser. So we'll go on to the next slide. All right. So the first really big question we always want to help our clients understand and have answered is who's this vehicle for and how will they be using the vehicle? Will they be the driver? And if so, are they going to be transferring from their wheelchair or will they be driving from their wheelchair? So as we mentioned previously about those securement options, depending on how they plan on using the vehicle or perhaps driving is going to change what we recommend in the type of conversion and the type of equipment. The other big question is if they're going to be a passenger, where do they plan on sitting in the vehicle? We went over those side entry and rear entry conversions a moment ago. So depending on the answer to this question, that's going to determine what kind of vehicle we're going to recommend. And then how many passengers will the vehicle need to accommodate? And then how many wheelchair passengers? So sometimes we do have clients who have the need to transfer more than one wheelchair passenger. So this is all very important information. We can go to the next slide. So what kind of mobility device is being used? So we have clients using wheelchairs and scooters and other mobility devices as well. So it's important to know what device is being used, the size of that device to make sure that the accessible vehicle will accommodate it correctly, so comfortably and safely. When we're talking about wheelchairs, we want to know, will it be a power wheelchair or a manual wheelchair? Does this client perhaps use more than one wheelchair? So we want to make sure that we'll be able to accommodate every device that they plan on using. And then again, will that client be transferring or staying seated in that wheelchair for transportation? When our clients are using scooters, we always want to know, is it three-wheel or four-wheel? And if that client is using a scooter, we want to make sure that they're aware that they will need to transfer off of that device. It's okay to stay seated in a wheelchair, but not a scooter. So making sure that that's understood as well. And then the measurements of the device. So these are the three very important measurements we always like to take into consideration. This is going to really shape what we recommend for that type of conversion. So we want to know the seated height. So from that client's head to their floor when they're seated in that mobility device, the width of the wheelchair or scooter. If your wheelchair has armrests that stick out further than the wheels, we always want that measurement too. And then the length of the wheelchair. So each accessible vehicle is not built equally. They all accommodate different types of mobility devices, and we want to make sure we find the right one for you. We can go to the next slide. So purchase, lease, and rental options. We do offer all three. I'll just briefly go over kind of what you can expect in those regards. So we can go to the next slide. So for purchasing, in generality, we're going to be looking at a vehicle 10 years or newer with less than 100,000 miles. And then down payment, again, in general, most of our lenders prefer 20% down, with 10% being considered the minimum. None of what I have on this slide is written in stone. So it's all just based on the vehicle itself and the client's individual situation. But these are good generalities to keep in mind when searching for an accessible vehicle. And we can go to the next slide. Leasing, we do offer several different leasing programs. That's going to include a new or slightly used vehicle with a new mobility conversion. The down payment amount plus the first month's payment plus fees is generally what is collected at the time of that lease. Those leases are going to have a set mileage allowance for the lease term. A lot of the advertised leases will have 5,000 miles a year, but they can go all the way up to 15,000. You'll just want to work with the consultant you're working with and make sure they know how many miles you plan on driving. And then there's always a set residual amount when it comes to leasing. So this is the amount that you can purchase the vehicle for at the end of the lease. So at that end of the lease term, you can choose to turn in the vehicle or you can choose to purchase the vehicle for that residual amount. And you can always finance that amount as well if needed. And we can go on to that next slide. Rental options. On this slide, I do have some rental rates written down here. You can also view them at mobilityworks.com. They have the ability to reserve that vehicle or that rental vehicle for you online there. So just real quick, we do have daily rates starting at $185 a day, and then those weekly rates and monthly rates. It's all going to change based off of how long you rent that vehicle. The weekend special is very popular for a lot of our clients. We also recommend if you're purchasing an accessible vehicle for the first time and you have the ability to maybe try out a rental first. That weekend special is Friday at 1 to Monday at 9, so offers you a great amount of time to try out that vehicle. And we can go to the next slide. So where to find Mobility Works, where to find us. We can go to the next slide. We are nationwide, so we have over 90 locations all over the place. We do offer an online experience, so that is my department. I lead our online sales team. So our product specialists will work with you virtually. We'll generally do a what we call a needs analysis, where we go through quite a few questions, understand your needs, and are able to recommend an accessible vehicle based off of that conversation. That all takes place either online or on the phone. So you can stay home and not travel anywhere. A lot of people are choosing that option here lately. So you can find us at shop, that's shop.mobilityworks.com. We also have a wheelchair van dimension guide available there too. So if you know the make and model of your wheelchair, you can pop it in, answer a couple questions on how you plan on using that vehicle, and it will automatically show you some accessible vehicles that would be available to you. And then you can also visit us at one of our locations. So a certified mobility consultant would work with you directly. And we have a link there so you can view the location closest to you based off of your zip code. So again, we can set an appointment at your home at one of our locations, or we can set a virtual appointment with you where we talk to you on the phone or through email to kind of learn more and help you further. And we can go to the next slide. So just want to say thank you to Lori and everyone for having me. My contact information is here on the slide. So please feel free to reach out to me. If anyone has any questions, I'd be happy to help.
Great. Thank you so much, Molly. All the presenters will continue to stay on this session. I invite you again, if there are any unanswered questions you'd like to post in the question box, and our presenters will help to answer those questions. Next slide, please. I wanted to go over a couple more resources. So next slide. So while you're putting the questions into the Q&A so the presenters can answer your questions that remain, so NDI invites people who use accessible vehicles to submit their story around purchasing an accessible vehicle. People who submit documents or MP3 reels or participate in the production of videos selected by NDI are eligible to receive a stipend of $100. If that person owns an ABLE account, we can probably make arrangements to have that stipend directly deposited into an ABLE account. And then there were many, many questions about all the resources that were shared today. Almost all of those resources are in these two resource guides that are posted in chat. They are also available at National Disability Institute's Accessible Vehicle Assistive Technology portion of the website, and we welcome you to share those links widely. And when people receive those, they can scan the QR code that takes them directly to our website so that they can continue to view additional information as it's posted. And so I just wanted to review a couple questions that we saw come up quite a bit. So many people who have a disability themselves may not be able to drive maybe for a period of time while they're going for the assessment or whatever. But a person who provides supports to that individual may be eligible for grant funding to be able to purchase that wheelchair accessible vehicle or the vehicle that does have hand controls and other items that will be helpful to that individual. So please contact each of those grant providers and see, given your particular circumstance, if you might be eligible for the grant. Also, the alternative financing programs, in some cases, a person who does not have the disability but would drive the individual who needs accessibility features in a vehicle could apply for a loan. So again, you can reach out there, and we know that Mobility Works and the other accessible vehicle dealerships available across the United States, they may know about grants and other funding to help given your particular case scenario. So you can ask those questions along the process of selecting the vehicle that will best meet your needs. And somebody put in an interesting question, like, I know people who are really, really tall, and not every vehicle is going to work for them. So even like when you're about to select a vehicle to lease or to use just for a trip, to do a test drive to make sure that that's going to meet your needs, And maybe you need to do that well in advance because stock may be limited, right? For different options available. We had some questions, and maybe Molly, you could speak to this. Sometimes a person will purchase an accessible vehicle at, let's say, Mobility Works, but then it needs to go to another facility for another type of modification to be installed. Could you speak to that, please?
Sure. So that question, are we talking about having the conversion installed on a non-modified vehicle? Is that okay? Yes.
Sure.
Fantastic. So, if you currently have a vehicle and you'd like to have a conversion installed on it, we'll want to know the VIN of the vehicle. So, in general, for example, Chrysler Voyagers, Chrysler Pacificas, those are available for conversion, but we'll want the exact VIN to make sure that your exact vehicle is eligible. There's lots of options um, and packages on vehicles that can make it harder to convert. So we would want that VIN to verify. Um, Most converters, they're going to require the vehicle have less than 50,000 miles, although sometimes we can get that exception. So to start off, if you already have that vehicle, reach out to us, give us that VIN and mileage, and we can tell you what's available. If you're looking to purchase a vehicle for conversion, always reach out to us first and make sure you give us that VIN before you make that purchase.
Great. I'd like to invite our presenters, if you think we missed anything today, to share information you think uh, is important for people to hear. So this is Lori. I've purchased vehicles, um, and I think it's important that we always be vigilant that if an interest rate of 2 or 4% is advertised, in my case, I need to take steps, right, to qualify for those nice low interest rates so that when I walk or roll into a dealership, I know that I can access the lowest rate of interest available when I make my purchase. And if the vehicle that's available doesn't meet my needs, maybe I can't comfortably sit behind that steering wheel or the features that I need um, can't be installed in that particular vehicle. I want to know that in advance. And I want to also try to pick out a vehicle like Consumer Reports says has a reliable history that it will cost me less every time that vehicle needs to be repaired. So please consider that. We welcome your feedback regarding this webinar. We have a brief survey for you to complete now, and we will also send another survey. If you need additional information, let us know that, and we will certainly get back to you. And we thank all of our experts today who shared their important information with you today. Thank you. Can you pull up the survey, please? So the questions read, I feel confident I can apply something that I learned today. And it's got a rating level of I strongly disagree, disagree, I feel neutral about this, or I agree or strongly agree. We're curious what information was most helpful. And if we're able to schedule webinars in the future, what topics would you suggest that we cover? And we thank you very much for joining us today. Have a good one. Bye-bye now.